3 Golden Eagles for War Thunder. Link in the description. Hello you sexy beasts, welcome back to War Thunder. So it's been a couple of weeks now since patch 1.15 was released, and I've had some time to play around with most of the new vehicles, most of the new mechanics, a couple of the new... Really Windows? Windows update. Anyways, I've had a bit of time to mess around with all the new stuff, and I've decided to do a video on the current state of War Thunder. Now, normally I don't do this, I've never done a real discussion video before on a patch, and long-time viewers of mine know that I like to stay impartial, I like to stay neutral on issues. I never praise Gaijin too much, but I don't hate train on them either. Now, I feel like I'll have to break that bond somehow in this video. The first thing I want to do is go over everything that was introduced. Some of you probably don't know what really happened in this patch. Then we're going to go over the negatives, the mostly really game-breaking negatives in my opinion. And after that we're going to go over the positives and over the efforts of Gaijin to fix what they broke. So, what did we see in patch 1.59? The most prominent introduction was the ATGM tanks. We got the IT-1, which is the Soviet tank. We got the German Raketenjagdpanzer II. We got the American M551 Sheridan, and we got the British/Swedish STRV-81. Now, the ATGMs in general are, I gotta say, they are quite balanced. I don't see any problem with them. I've played with them, I've played against them, and honestly they don't really break the game whatsoever. They are a nice addition, they're overall a nice addition. They're very good at long range, they're very good at hitting targets, stationary targets at long range, and such. They're excellent for maps that feature long lanes of sight, such as El Alamein and Hütten Forest, for example. But overall they don't really do anything better than normal tanks don't already do. And of course, there's a distinction between the vehicles. The fastest reloading with the best penetration is the IT-1, but it only gets the missile launcher and only has 15 rounds, so you can't really do too much with that. The Raketenjagdpanzer II is honestly awful. It's just awful. The missiles are controlled with the WASD keys, and whilst I haven't tried it too much since the dev server, I'm not really a big fan. Yeah. I wasn't a big fan of the Kanonjagdpanzer either, which this vehicle is based on, and it pretty much just furthers my bias towards these tanks being quite awful. The Sheridan is quite an interesting tank. It's very mobile, has close to no armor, has 152mm gun/launcher, which means that it can actually fire 152mm HE shells with this thing. This thing is really quite fast, and it gets a 50 caliber machine gun, which is very useful for taking out lightly armored vehicles. And finally, the British counterpart, the Swedish STRV-81, is a Centurion tank, a Centurion Mark III with 3 ATGMs stuck to the side of the turret. Now, this is only a premium vehicle, it's only a bundle vehicle if I'm not mistaken, so you can't even buy it with GE. So effectively, the British don't really have a counterpart to the other nations in terms of ATGMs, missile, especially since this thing only gets 3 of them, and they are controlled with the WASD keys. However, the tank itself is quite good. It's a Centurion Mark III with a premium account bonus, so it's a good grinding machine. Now, of course, those weren't the only vehicles we saw introduced. In the USSR Tech Tree, we also saw the introduction of the ASU-57 and the ASU-85. I've seen the ASU-57 in game. The thing is really tiny, might actually be even smaller than the M22. The ASU-85 I haven't played yet. I do know that it gets a APHE shell at quite a low tier, so with a quite fast reload, so that might be an interesting tank. However, it might suffer the same fate as the Kanonenjagdpanzer. The Russians also saw the KV-2 ZIS-6, which is a KV-2 which replaces the 152mm howitzer with a 107mm gun. So I do have that tank. I am going to do a video on it. I just haven't found the time yet. But what I've heard from my YouTube colleagues, this tank is quite awesome. It's still a one-shot machine with a much faster reload. The Germans got, of course, the Raketenjagdpanzer. We also got the Stura Emil, which is a very lightly armored tank destroyer with a 128mm gun. That thing sounds awesome. We got a new reserve tank, which is a Panzer 3B. That's actually a good introduction. I always felt that the Panzer 2s just weren't really all that great for new players. They are quite great for a more experienced player, since they have the most armor of the reserve tanks if I'm not mistaken, and the gun is very fast firing. But since it is very fast firing and pretty much does no explosive damage, you have to kill the whole crew, and new players just don't know how to do that. So the introduction of this tank is something quite good. We also got a captured KV-2 and a T-40 and T-34. Nothing too special about those. Those are pretty much the same vehicles as in the regular Russian tech tree, just in a premium form in the German one. The British didn't get too much in terms of tanks. We got the Cromwell Mark V RP3. I have played that tank. The rockets are quite good, but it's generally just still a Cromwell with 4 rockets on it. The USA got something interesting. They got quite a lot of interesting tanks. First off, we got the T-29 heavy tank, which I did the video on. I absolutely love that thing. The 105mm APHE shell is awesome. Now, it could have a little bit more armor. The turret armor, it seems, is a bit non-functional, and the hull armor is absolutely awful. But overall, the tank is quite good. The tank is quite good. We also saw the M48A1. I've played this tank and I'm planning to do a video on it, but I warn you right away, the M48 suffers from the same fate as the M47 and the M46, if I'm not mistaken. The stock shell is an APCR shell, which is beyond useless at this tier. The M48 is a 7.7 battle rating, and you literally can't penetrate an IS-3 from the front or the side hull armor with your APCR shell. The only thing you can penetrate is the back or the sides of the turret. Now, the IS-3 sits at 7.3, so it's a lower battle rating, so yeah. Thankfully, this tank does get heat FS shells later on, so that makes it a bit more competitive, but the stock shell is really quite awful. We also saw the LVT-A1 reserve amphibian tank. I haven't driven this thing too much. I think I haven't driven it since the patch was introduced, but well, it's a reserve tank that floats. So, tactics, amphibious, water, ships confirmed. In terms of aircraft, we saw quite a couple of interesting additions as well. First, of course, is the Wyvern S4, a British Tier 4, if not mistaken, premium aircraft. The first turbojet in the game with an amazing sound. I do have this aircraft on the other account. I've played it a bit. I'm just still trying to figure out how to most effectively use that thing, but expect a video on it sometime soon. But I can't promise, for reasons that I'm going to go into later on in the video when we reach towards the complaints about this patch. We saw the HE219, which is a German premium, well, just war machine. This thing gets 2 30mm MK103s, 2 30mm MK108s, and 2 20mm MG151s. This thing is bristling with guns. You absolutely do not want to go into a head-on with this thing. We also saw the N1K1J, JA, or whatever they call it. This is pretty much a cut-down version of the N1K2 with a lower armament. It gets only 2 20mm cannons and 2 machine guns, if I'm not mistaken. However, this thing has quite a lower battle rating of only 5.0, and it seems like this thing is quite a Seal Club machine. I haven't flown it too much yet myself, but I've read on Reddit that this thing is quite powerful, so I hope that I can do something about that in the near future. The Russians also got the introduction of the Yak-30, which is an absolutely excellent jet fighter. Now, I did already a video on it, and I argumentated for it being moved to 9.0. Now, the jet could very well hold its own at 9.0. I've been in multiple 9.0 matches, and I can very well hold my own. Then again, it might just be me. That might just be that the jet plays into my specific playstyle, but it's definitely a very, very powerful jet, and I'm currently doing the stat testing on that to compare to, say, the LA-15 and a couple of 9.0 jets, like for example the F-9F Panther, the what's it called, the Sea Venom, stuff like that. I'm going to compare the Yak-30 to other aircraft to argumentate on if this thing should stay at 8.0 or if it should go to 9.0. We also got the introduction of the infamous TU-4. Now, I'm not going to lose too many words on this because the TU-4 is just the biggest head, like the spotlight of the problem. However, the TU-4 is not the only problem. We're going to get into that later on, don't worry. The British also got the Halifax Mark 3A bomber. Nothing really special about it. I haven't even flown it yet, so not really too based about that. The Germans have the HS-123 biplane. It's a biplane. It's recently got turned into an attacker, so that might mess with the spawns, but I haven't flown it either. And also the HE-162A1. Now, this is going to be a special event fighter. So apparently there will be a special event where you can unlock this jet. And from what I've gathered, this is a HE-162, but it ditches the 20mm cannons in favor of two 30mm cannons. So this thing might be very, very interesting. In terms of Air Force, the American Air Force didn't get really anything special. They only get the B-18 bomber, which is a low-tier bomber. Not too interesting to me personally. And the Japanese also got the Ki-61-2, which I haven't flown yet either. Alright, so those were all of the vehicles introduced, but we also got a couple of new maps, and maps that weren't really announced. First of all, the great big map that was introduced is Port of Novorossiysk. That really weird name. It's quite a huge map from what I've gathered. I haven't had the chance of playing it myself yet in combined battles, but I'm looking forward to it. There's a nice mixture between city combat and sea warfare, so it might be something interesting. I have to look into it. We have a new aircraft mission, Operation Ballon-sur-Mer, which pretty much allows you to fly from France to Britain. I've done a video on that on the test server in my Hunter, where I flew from France to Britain, and it is quite a beautiful map, but absolutely huge. The map has 128 by 128 kilometers. Yeah, this thing is huge. We also got a couple of new sort of hidden maps. Fields of Poland seems to be a cut-down version of the Poland map. Sands of Tunisia, which sets you up on the other side of the rocks that are on the west of the current Tunisia map. Haven't had the opportunity to play on that map yet, but it sounds interesting. And we also got a map that I absolutely hate, which is something Normandy. It's essentially a cut-down version of Normandy that takes place in the southern fields of that map, and it is awful. It is freaking awful. I hate that map with all I have. That map is so small. It is way too small, and it's in the open field, so you can't even flank around. That map reminds me a lot of a World of Tanks map. It's awful. It's honestly awful, and I can understand it somewhat for arcades, but RB, it has nothing. It doesn't belong in RB. Honestly, I wish that map burns in a fire. That's how much I hate that map. I'm probably going to do a separate video on that if they don't fix it sometime soon. But at the moment, every time I see that map loading up in RB tanks, I quit out the battle. It's just not worth it. Alright, so those are the vehicles and the maps done. We also saw a couple of changes in gameplay mechanics. The most prominent one is the changes in locations and missions in terms of spawns. Yes, we have had quite a bit of a spawn system overhaul, meaning that well, first of all, the distance between spawns are now increased, so that gives fighters and bombers more time to maneuver around. In RB, of course, which is going to open up some more tactical options. However, we also saw a change in classifications for aircraft and their respective spawn altitudes or spawn locations. So, the attackers have now a 1 kilometer spawn, which means they have an air spawn. These apply to, for example, the HS-123 that I mentioned earlier, the biplane. Haven't really seen many more attackers that take advantage of this spawn, but it's something good to balance out aircraft that don't have a very good climb rate. Interceptors also get a 1 kilometer spawn. This is actually quite good. I've been having a blast playing the TAR-152 and the Dornier 355, which both get... actually no, the TAR-152 does get 1000 meter spawn, but the Dornier 355 gets an air defense fighter spawn, which is at 2 kilometers altitude. And that really helps that aircraft. That really helps that aircraft. And now means that most of the time you're at your optimal altitude before encountering the enemy, and it allows you to actually use the aircraft more effectively. The bombers have been bumped up from 3 kilometers to 40 kilometers. Not too bothered with that change. There are other factors that are in combination with this breaking the game right now, but it's not the spawns alone. I can understand this. Bombers were kind of, well, just cannon fodder before this patch, and the new spawn also definitely helps in that regard. It makes playing bombers somewhat more liable. And finally we have the long-range bomber spawn, which applies especially to the TU4 and the B-29. And these have been bumped up to 5 kilometers altitude. Now, this might be a little bit too much. I'm going to come back to this point a little bit later. Very prominently, we also saw the introduction of new hangars for both aircraft, ground vehicles and ships. Yes, you heard it right. These hangars are all on the same map. I actually have a custom mission where I can fly around on this map, and hopefully I can show you what it looks like. And if you go towards one of the sides of the map, there's actually a port. So ships are confirmed. It definitely looks like ships are coming out maybe yet this year, end of this year, early next year. We might see ships in War Thunder. With a couple of Armour modules additions, not something very interesting. Yeah, it's Armour modules. Yeah, they don't really do much. Big change though. We had an economy and development change. So the requirement to have previous vehicles in specific aircraft and ground vehicle branches between ranks 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 have been removed, which means that you don't need to research specific vehicles anymore to research vehicles in the same line on the next rank, which is great for lower tier players. We also saw a temporary change introduced in the research point requirement for some aircraft, and this is a great one. They pretty much slashed the RP costs for aircraft across the board, especially jets. Some jets now take half the RP cost to research, which is great. It's going to introduce more players into lower tier jet battles, which is going to balance out the matchmakers somewhat. However, do keep in mind that this is only here for 2 months. So apparently after 2 months they're going to increase the research points again. So do try to take the summer, do try to take advantage of the summer to research for jets. Now's the time to do that. We also saw some aircraft in the 5th rank being merged into groups, namely the MiG-9 and the MiG-9 Late, the P-80 and the F-80C, the F-86 and the F-86A5 and the F-25, and the Meteor Mark III and the C-Meteor Mark III. Now, what groups means is that you don't need to research both of the aircraft in that group to research the next aircraft down the line. So you don't need to research both the MiG-9 and the MiG-9 Late now to go for the MiG-15. You only need to research the first one. Same thing with the P-80. You only need to research the P-80 and then you can jump straight onto the F-84. And probably this is the best change, the F-84, the F-86A5. You now don't have to go through the F-86 F-25. You can skip straight to the F2, which is an awesome aircraft. We've had a couple of new camouflages and damage models. Now, this is interesting. All right, listen up. This is going to be a bit complicated, but I'm going to explain it as we go. So, I'm going to read this straight from the devlog. Ricochet chances at acute or obtuse angles with larger differences between caliber and armor thickness have been changed. For AP and APHE rounds, where the caliber exceeds the armor thickness by over 2.5 times, the ricochet chance is 0% if the angle of impact is 24 degrees or more from the plane of the armor. So essentially what this means is, if the caliber of your gun is 2.5 times thicker than the armor you are penetrating, essentially this completely removes the random ricochet chance up to an angle of 24 degrees, which means it's going to go in every time given that you have enough penetration. And this is great. This is a great chance. It means that you can no longer bounce randomly off of AA vehicle that only have like 10 millimeters of armor. That doesn't happen anymore. It does not happen anymore, and this is great. However, it isn't quite enough. I've made the math, and my main concern was the T-34. We all know how trollish the T-34 is. The T-34 has 45mm of frontal armor, which is sloped back at 45 degrees. And that means it quite often has random bounce chances of shells that it shouldn't be bouncing. Now, In order to take advantage of these new bouncing mechanics, your shell would have to have at least 112.5 millimeters of a caliber, which means that sadly most of the guns in the game don't take advantage of this. The only tanks that take advantage of the new bouncing mechanics in terms of the T-34 armor are the Russian 122mm guns, some of the American 120mm guns, as in the I think the M103 is the only one, isn't it? Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, the M103 is the only one. Well, you have to share them with the 152mm gun, of course, but that wouldn't have a problem penetrating the T-34 either way. The Germans only get the 128mm guns, so the Jagdtiger, the Studer Emil, and the Maus are the only ones who can take advantage of this. What else? I think the British do get the Conqueror and the Conway, and the Chieftain, of course, which do get 120mm guns. So yeah, pretty much you have to have 120mm guns or up in order to take advantage of this mechanic. I would have liked to see a bit more. I would have liked to see a bit more. But it's a help, I mean, at least AA vehicles can't just randomly bounce your shots anymore, which is great. We also had some introductions of side skirts for vehicles based on the King Tiger chassis. They are now added to the damage model. Maybe this can help against HE and APHE Shells, but I doubt that, honestly. Here's a big change. The 105mm T13 APCDC HE projectile has been added for the T29 as well as the T28 and the T95. Now I've done a video on the T29 featuring this shell, and you saw what an absolute nuke around this thing is. That is an absolutely awesome shell and something that the Americans have needed for a long time. And now that it also applies to the T28 and the T95, the T95 might actually be a viable tank now. Right, we also had a couple of changes in flight models, which I'm not going to go all over, just is way too much of a big list. However, this is where I start talking about the thing that wasn't officially explained. Now, there has been one major change that was nowhere to be found in the patch notes, which was the changes to bullet damage and damage models for aircraft. Sorry, I'm burping a bit. Have you noticed that since the patch it is much harder to take down anything? Yeah, that's because the damage models or the bullet damage or a mixture of the both have been modified. Aircraft are much tougher now, which is also the reason why in my Yak 30 video I seem to have such a great problem taking stuff out with the 23mm guns. Every gun is affected now, even the 30mm Meaninger shells from the Germans don't explode stuff as they used to do. Now, I can understand the thinking behind this. I honestly can understand the thinking behind this. It helps newer players. It's a great change for newer players. It teaches them to kind of finesse their aim, to have more sustained aim instead of just twitch reactions. And at the same time improving their survivability so that they don't just get shot down immediately as soon as something shoots at them. At the same time, it completely broke RB. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier with the combination of the high altitude spawns for long range bombers. For the first weeks after the patch, there was a massive bomber spam. The TU4 was of course the most prominent member. There were entire teams full of TU4s and there was nothing anyone could do about them. However, the TU4 wasn't the only problem. B-17s, B-29s, heck, I even saw Sterlings. I saw Sterlings in the game. Who even flies Sterlings anymore? Wellingtons, you name it. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. Because they could just overwhelm you. They could completely overwhelm you. A full team of bombers could end the game by bombing out the airfield, and you could do nothing about them because you just couldn't shoot them down. And even now, B-29s, B-17s, TU-4s, they're almost impossible to shoot down. I've had a couple of situations in my Dornier 335. Now, if you don't know, the Dornier 335 has one 30mm Mk103 cannon and two 20mm MG151 cannons. It is one of the best loadouts at that tier. It has extremely good firepower. And it gets an air defense fighter spawn, which means it spawns at 2 kilometers altitude already. Which means that most of the time I can actually get up to altitude with the B-29s, with the B-17s, before I get up to them. The problem is, I cannot shoot them down. I've wasted my entire ammo load into the wing of a B-29, and he just kept flying. He, on the other hand, only has to hit me once. The Johnny 335 has massive fuel tanks in the fuselage, and once those are set on fire, you don't recover. Those never go out. I've never had the fuel tanks of my Johnny 334 go out before my plane took too much damage, and that's a real problem. It makes it unfun to play RB anywhere between the 5.3 and the 8.0 matchmaker right now, because it's completely just stupid how difficult it is, how dangerous, how stupid it actually is to go after a bomber. Because he has all the advantages. He has the altitude advantage over you, he has the resistance advantage over you, and even if you take him down, you probably took heavy damage from the bomber, you wasted all of your ammo, and you have to go back to rearm. Now, this isn't so much a problem for fighters that are good at low altitude, but by the time you get back to the airfield, you are at the altitude disadvantage, and the enemy team is all over you. So you literally don't have a chance to win anymore. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Now, Gaijin did address this to some extent. They did limit the number of bombers in RB battles to 4 per team. But honestly, that is still not enough. 2 B-29s, maybe even 3 B-29s can still do the same amount of damage. And if they fly together, it's still impossible to take them down. 4 is just too much. 4 is still too much, honestly. It needs to be 3. TU4, I'm not even going to talk about the TU4. The TU4 gets 23mm cannons and he gets 10 of them. It is suicide going after the TU4. And even if you can get within range to shoot your gun without them having much of a chance of hitting you, you're still going to waste your entire ammo load before they go down, if they ever go down. And honestly, it just kind of ruined our ARB for me. I have no fun playing ARB anymore. And honestly, I think I'm going to retire from ARB until this is fixed. I just can't play aircraft at the moment. Now, of course, this is just a major problem, but it also had a negative effect on a certain vehicle class. Vehicles like, for example, the Fokker 490, which rely on boom and zoom tactics, on energy fighting tactics, which only have a small window of opportunity for you to fire, have been heavily affected by this damage model buff, so to speak. You pretty much can't take down an aircraft on the first run anymore. You need to have sustained fire before something takes serious damage. And that is problematic when you're fighting an aircraft like those. It doesn't affect turret fighters too much. The F8F and the Spitfires probably haven't taken too much of a hit of this. But yeah, everything else, it is bad. Energy fighters have had a big hit with this patch. And it just doesn't help. It really doesn't help. ARB for me has been ruined completely. I just refuse to play ARB on anything that's a fight threat between 5.3 and 8.0 at the moment, because it just isn't worth it. It just isn't worth the frustration that you get from those matches. Now, those were pretty heavy negatives, but of course Gaijin has been addressing some of these issues. They've actually surprised me quite a lot with the amount of server updates they've been putting out lately. The first one was of course the limiting of the number of bombers in RB to 4 bombers maximum. As I said, I would have preferred to be 3, just because it still is impossible to take down 4 TU4s or B-29s before they make it to the airfield, but at least it's a help. After that they did quite a big of a patch. Now, they have buffed... Ah yes, I did forget to mention this. Not only did they buff the damage models of all aircrafts, they also nerfed 50 cals, which means that 50 caliber ammunition was pretty much useless for a certain period of time, which took jets, for example, like the P-80, which already had a hard time shooting anything down, to making it completely impossible to shoot anything down, pretty much. Now they have redressed that, they have buffed the 12.7mm ammunition again, and not only that, they have also fixed the ammunition for the German 13mm and the Italian 12.7mm machine guns. They now do more damage. However, the damage models still stand, so yeah, it's still bad. It is still bad. So, what is my overall thought about this patch? We got a lot of content, that is true. We did get a lot of content. But at what price? This patch just kind of ruined a lot of stuff. It was not a good patch in my opinion. Now, I like the new tanks, I like the new aircraft, the Vibrant sounds awesome. The AT gems are actually quite good, they're surprisingly good. We gotta give props to Gaijin, they actually heard our complaints about the medkits. Medkits were not introduced with this patch, because the community did cry out about those and Gaijin listened. At the same time, I don't understand exactly why they did the damage model buff. No one asked for it, as far as I'm aware. It was perfectly fine. I can understand to some extent that bombers need a bit of a damage model buff, because it would just go down way too easily, but they overextended it, they overdid it. And this in combination with the bomber spawns just made bombers overpowered, honestly overpowered. It's ridiculous how powerful they are right now. I don't know, man. There's a big problem between Gaijin and the community, and it has multiple causes. Now, Gaijin has been known to not really listen to the community, but at the same time they've been doing improvements. They've changed the dev server. They do have the dev server open longer now, and have had a 10 times RP and Silverline boost on that, so more people can actually test the stuff. But at the same time, they had very weird hours. They were mostly at night for the European players, and there still weren't enough dev servers. They weren't announced properly. And whilst they did take the feedback on the medkits, they never even mentioned damage models or the bullet damage, which is a really sneaky in my opinion. And it just discourages me, man. I still love the game. I still love playing tanks. Tanks are awesome. And I love playing aircraft, but this patch just kind of ruined aircraft for me. And I think it's down to misconception between the community and Gaijin. Here's my theory. Now, a couple of years ago, if you're not aware, there was a rumor, or, well, pretty much confirmed. I'm going to say rumor, just to cover my own ass here. That Wargaming, the company that produces World of Tanks, had actually paid people to spread negative feedback on the War Thunder forums. Now, that had much more of an impact on the game today than we actually thought it would have. It kind of created a negative feedback loop. The War Thunder forums are an absolute shit show. It's a toxic pool of just shit. It's awful. And it kind of became cool, so to speak, in the community to hate on Gaijin. Now this is a problem. I see this on Reddit, I see this on the forums. It's a circle jerk of who can hate on Gaijin most. And that is a problem because it doesn't encourage Gaijin to actually listen to us. Most of the time, most of the complaints that are leveled at the game are leveled by players who don't understand the game, that don't really understand it as a massive skill curve in War Thunder, which I absolutely love actually. Good players that invest the time to learn the game, get rewarded for it, and the noobs get just feasted on. That's how it should work. Honestly, that's perfect in every single multiplayer game. But yeah, people complain a lot about stuff they just frankly don't have any idea about. And they just embark on the hate trains, they just overreact. The community likes to overreact a lot. And in return, Gaijin listens less and less to us. And that's a problem. The more hate that is leveled at Gaijin, the less they are going to listen to us. And when they actually do stuff like the damage model buff in combination with the bomber spawns, stuff that really needs fixing, stuff that really has valid complaints, they're not going to listen to us anymore. It's a bit like the story of the boy who cried wolf. So, I gotta say here, sorry community, but this is your fault. If we could just get on even grounds and make Gaijin listen to us in a proper civilized manner, without resorting to calling them names, without resorting to hating on them, just a circle jerk of hating, things might actually change. Things might honestly change. Because whilst I do understand the business model in Russia is quite a bit different, they're still not stupid. The guys at Gaijin are anything but stupid. They do listen to constructive feedback. But of course they're going to completely ignore any kind of feedback that has just offensive or mal-informed information in them. So it is up to us to help Gaijin fix the game, so to speak. So I want you to keep this in mind. Next time you go to Reddit, or next time you go to the forums, and you feel like writing a shitpost, hating on Gaijin, think again. Calm down, think about what you are going to write. If it's something about a game mechanic or a flight model or something like that, think if it's not you instead. For example, if you can't fly a certain aircraft, try and see if you can learn how to fly the aircraft beforehand, before you're called underpowered or overpowered. Same thing for Russian bias. I understand the concept of Russian bias. I gotta admit that there are some vehicles that are fishy, but here's the thing, it's not exclusive to Russians. The word Russian bias gets thrown around a lot because the company is Russian. But if the company was German, you would heard German bias, because Germans also get some extremely good aircraft. The Americans get some extremely good vehicles. The Sheridan, for example, the Sheridan is an excellent little vehicle. You don't hear Sheridan bias. You hear IT-1 bias because it's Soviet. And honestly, the IT-1 is good, but more overall, the Sheridan is better. So overall, it's just, we need to stop. We as a community, we need to stop with this circle jerk of hating on the company. We need to change ourselves if we want the company to change, if we want this game to change. Because the last thing I want to see is this game going down in flames because of the hate between the community and the studio. So this will require a bit of an effort on both our side and Gaijin's side. Hopefully we can stick together as a community, we can actually start doing proper constructive feedback. Probably completely avoid the forums, because honestly that's a lost cause. The forums are a lost cause. But my hope is that we can really turn this game around and make it better. I have great hopes for this game. I mean, we're going to see the introduction of ships probably at the end of this year, which is going to completely change the whole meta of the game around again. And it's going to be an awesome game. We just need to make sure that it's going to be even awesomer. Is that even a word? It is now. So, I want to hear your opinions. If you've made it this far into the video, I mean, this has been now... I've been talking for 40 minutes on myself. I'm probably going to cut this down a little bit on the video, but I've been talking for 40 minutes now. If you're still sticking around, thank you first of all for actually taking your time to listen through this whole video. And tell me what you think. Tell me what you think about this patch in general. What do you think about the changes? What could be made? The changes that could be made to make it better. And what you are willing to do to make the game better as well. Like this video if you did. Subscribe if you're new around here. And as always, my name is MikeGoesBoom. And thank you very much for watching.
You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path along the lines with your shattered frame of mind. Or instead you could always stay. We can wait right here and play until somehow you can find a slightly better